Welcome, everybody, to another episode of A Cuppa with a Conversationalist. My name is Con, and I am the Conversationalist. And yes, I have my latte in tow as always. We're going to be talking innovation on today's program, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tim Mahlberg Sie. How are you, Tim?
Good, thanks, Con. How are you, mate?
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
A little bit of intro on Tim. With a curiosity for people and culture, a passion for community, and a dedication to creating impact, Tim has had a diverse career spanning corporate, non-profit, higher education, startups, and service industries. Qualified as an organisational psychologist, he's been developing individuals and organisations for nearly 20 years. He has a doctorate from the University of Sydney, which explored new ways of working with purpose to drive innovation in large institutions. At Stone & Chalk, Tim is the General Manager for South Australia, where he is working to grow our innovation ecosystems and inspire the next generation of innovators. Wow. Tim, my first question is, there's a real diverse sectors there. You've gone from your corporate, non-profit, polar opposite, higher education. What are some of the things that attracted you in those industries or those sectors that led to the moves?
Good question, Con. I think the common denominator across all of those is people doing interesting and good things and trying to make a difference wherever they are. So I think I've been someone in my life, never been satisfied with just one thing, like one type of career or one pathway. I've always been like, why can't I explore multiple? And I think that's been my journey since I was very young. I think I've had almost 40 different jobs and roles and titles in my lifetime already.
Wow.
And I've still got a fair way to go. You know, I'm not too old. I've still got some years.
Spring chicken, mate.
Yeah, I think it's about different people in different contexts and environments, and just this real insatiable curiosity of how people operate differently under different circumstances. So, and I think, you know, I'm a big believer that deep down people are good people. They want to make a difference. They want to live a good life.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious around that, how that plays out in these different places. And over the years, what I've found is that me personally switching these contexts and environments gives me this kind of helicopter or maybe like a balcony view on humanity in its finest and it's most challenging sometimes. And I just find that that's part of my own thirst for knowledge and learning, I'd say. But I think that also gives me a unique perspective into different industries, different environments. You can see it from these angles that most people in the room might not, because they're all maybe from a similar experience. So hopefully it makes me an interesting person, but it's definitely, I am interested in those around me as well.
Yeah, you make a really, really good point. We definitely, coming from different industries, you do bring that different perspective. We're looking through it from not the tainted lens that somebody may have. And one of the classic sayings in organizations when you get new people, somebody will say, "This is the way we've always done it."
Yeah,
and
right.
And we know that's not very helpful. I can't not go here. We had an interesting conversation before I actually started to record. You spoke about you enjoyed chaos, and to that we got to a point where you spoke about a Year 12 presentation that you went to and the conversation there.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that for the listeners. That was fascinating in terms of getting uncomfortable with chaos, because at the end of the day, the only certainty is change.
Yeah, I mean, chaos is probably the extreme version of change, right? But it is interesting when people are confronted with change or, maybe diversifying contexts and experiences, how they show up. And I think that's what's really interesting, is that these circumstances can be when we can be our best, humanity's finest, where we support each other, where we go through a process of shared learning and trying to make sense of the situation. And the way that we kind of, again, from different perspectives, can approach that differently to actually support each other to understand a new reality or a next step forward and things like that. And I think that's, at the core of my work at the moment, but through my own learning through those different industries as well, is that it actually takes a diverse range of perspectives to be able to navigate a meaningful and impactful and, successful path forward. And I think that when there is chaos or disruption or change, that's the opportunity for us to kind of have that course correction and go, well, maybe there's actually a better way that we might find together through this period of time. That is our opportunity to take a different step forward. And I think that's why I enjoy the chaos, because one, it allows people to kind of show up in a more humane, a more supportive, a more kind way. But then two, that we're able to find a new way forward together. And I think that's what really excites me.
Mm. Yeah, well said. Well said. I'd like to briefly chat about Stone and Chalk. And through my reading, I've discovered that it's the largest innovation community in Australia.
Yep.
4 hubs, over 6,000 residents, over 515 startups and scale-ups, over $1 billion raised by residents and alumni, over 150 companies, and of course the big one, over 100,000 jobs have been created. What makes Stone and Chalk, I guess, A, so successful, but B, what is it its unique selling proposition in terms of other innovation hubs, not only in Australia, but perhaps in the world?
Yeah. I think, well, to start with, Stone and Chalk is a non-profit, for-purpose organization, and that's what really drew me to it to start with. And it really is on this impact pathway, which has this really bold mission, which is to transform Australia into a sustainable, tech-driven economy. And that's around, one of the ways is through creating these jobs in these new emerging tech industries. And these aren't just jobs in any kind of industry. They're actually trying to solve problems that really matter in smarter, more efficient, more effective ways that can be scaled globally. So it's a community of ambitious, impact-driven people. So that's another reason why I was really drawn to it. And we're not like many other places where people of different organizations gather. We're not a co-working community. We're an innovation community that's not just kind of startups and scale-ups as founders and the teams that are actually growing. They're all on a growth or scaling trajectory. But it's also a community that embraces corporates and governments and associations and different individuals that all have a different innovation or impact journey or ambition similar to us. But that they realize is that they will go further with others. So there's this sort of collective community, this generosity that comes from giving first and going, I will go further when I embrace, coming together with others rather than just going fast on my own. And again, I think that's a big part of what attracted me to Stone and Chalk, but also drives my work day to day, is essentially my strategy has always been, in my life, you collect good eggs, right? How far can you go when you bring good people together around problems that really matter in the world? And there's plenty of them out there around, poverty and, equality and, the impacts of climate change. And, we're coming up to summer in Australia and we've got catastrophic conditions in South Australia for fires. And then the next day we've got flooding, localized flooding happening. So these are challenges that affect us as humans, as in the environment and everyone around us. That actually there's things that we can do using technology in smart ways, and wrapping the support around these individuals, these very ambitious people, to be able to help them to go further. And a big part of it, I think my job is kind of bringing out the courage, not just in the founders and the teams that join them, but also in the large organizations, institutions around us that actually do have a social responsibility to do more good in the world. And we'll talk about my thesis later on, but it's a big part around, again, finding the good eggs around us and then bringing them into an environment, a context, a community where they can do more together. That's essentially what Stone and Chalk do.
I'm curious, you make a point about corporates and I guess what you guys do. What are some of the challenges that you face in getting corporates to adopt not only some of the concepts, but maybe some of the ideologies? Because from a corporate perspective, having been in that environment, it's really what's in it for the shareholders and not necessarily looking at maybe a bigger picture or how can we do something better. So what are some of the challenges that you face?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I've spent a long time in my career, and actually my whole doctoral thesis was looking at this as well, around how do you create a culture of innovating So not innovation, it's innovating as a practice. It's actually a behavior that what actually many organizations realize is that they need their people to be innovating, to be innovators. They need to be able to adopt identities and practices that enable them to find new pathways forward. So when the chaos hits, or when the change happens, or whether there's a disruptor coming in that actually undercuts their whole business model, they're actually on the front foot a bit and prepared to be able to kind of pivot and change along the way. But they don't do that on their own. They don't do that from the board. They do that from their people. So a big part of my journey and even what we do at Stone & Chalk is creating a culture that supports and encourages the sharing, the collaboration, the ideation, the exploration that eventually will lead to forms of innovating that will help an organization prepare. And actually just this morning, we're releasing a really great story around how Stone & Chalk's partnership with SA Water is beyond just, one around events or bringing people together, but it's actually around a shared learning around creating a culture of innovation. They've actually adopted some of the practices, the ways that we bring people together into their corporate environment, and had a lot of success with that. Which is that one of the things we do every week at Stone & Chalk, which Con, I think you've been along to, is our sweet spot, which is when we celebrate our wins, we ask for help, we find out what's coming up, we meet new people. So corporate can actually adopt some of the things that innovation communities like Stone & Chalk do, bringing it inside and going, well, we can create a community of innovators as well by adopting some of those practices. And it's really just around how we show up for each other, how we're generous, how we're vulnerable, how we invite others along to kind of solve things that really matter. Exactly the same thing. But it comes down to creating that culture. And that can happen both from a top down and some of those structures and the support from leaders, but also from that bottom up of encouraging, maybe the organizational deviants or the innovators to push the boundaries beyond their day job.
I'm curious about your doctorate. We spoke about that a little bit beforehand.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about, I guess, specifically what the doctorate focused on, or what the key outcomes were, and perhaps what are the one or two key things that corporate or industry that are listening can take away from it?
Yeah. Well, there's a whole thesis there. It's actually available to the public, so anyone can go in there, and there's a whole section on recommendations. I always like to make it open source, but I mean, maybe a step back. I was so after I completed my studies here in South Australia, I moved to Melbourne, and I was working at National Australia Bank there for a number of years. And my thesis really came out of something I noticed in myself, which was that every job that I had or I created or I rolled into was never kind of enough of a container for the kinds of things that I wanted to do in my work life, but also in that professional setting. There was always more opportunities I wanted to uncover. And it never really fitted, well, at all into my day job. So my title and the tasks and the responsibilities that was expected of me from my manager and all the way up was kind of just like this little bit of me, right? And there was all these other things that spilled out, not even just in the work context, but in a personal context too. And I was just looking for places to find where I could kind of play in other areas in the organization. And the only way I did that was kind of getting my job down to, being more efficient and, automating some of that, even using technology, right? So when I left the bank, after a number of years of kind of innovating my role and doing some crazy things, I had the opportunity for the PhD, and it was sponsored by Deloitte. And when I went into Deloitte, I saw all of these people that had a day job that was kind of ticking the box, but they were doing all these other things that were really interesting and actually helping to carve out new pathways, not just for themselves as professionals, as individuals, but also for the organization. Many of them were actually socializing new technologies, emerging tech, or they were bringing in, different facilitation techniques or things that were just like way, 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 way out there. But they were definitely not their day job. But they had promise for new innovations and new innovative directions and strategies for the organization. So my thesis really explored these extracurricular behaviors and work practices that didn't fit in their day job. And what I did is I kind of understood them as a kind of a different phenomenon that was, whilst it was very interesting, but actually kind of went beyond the way organizations understand engagement in the workplace, which typically is around their job, the things that are expected of them, and whether they go above and beyond in those. These are things that are kind of above but to the side.
Mm.
So I kind of package them into a new phenomenon called an alter identity performance, which is essentially kind of going beyond the day job into areas that had a lot of promise for an organization, but were really aligned to the passion, the expertise, the things that were really central to that person and their own impact journey, their sense of purpose in the workplace. So, you know, I found all these really interesting people, and all of them were kind of crafting these very fascinating kind of almost alter egos on top of their day job. And I got to track where they went in their journey. And many of them, you know, went too far and they went out, and maybe they got picked up by a competitor. Maybe they went and started a startup. But some of them actually went on to found whole new departments for their organization, you know, which became sanctioned by the organization because they were like, actually, this has a lot of promise. We should be investing in this person in this new direction and putting our support behind them. Now, that was the best case scenario, right? You can imagine it's a tumultuous journey for many of them. So in my thesis, I kind of carve out a whole lot of recommendations for individuals that want to explore beyond their role, for managers who could be actually providing support for them, and then for leaders and kind of the policy and the HR practices to kind of cultivate a culture of where people can bring more to their workplace than just what's expected of them, and what happens when it goes well and what happens when it doesn't. So it's really, really very fascinating. It's very much my own story, but it's a story of, you know, dozens and dozens of people that I saw in corporates in the one that I worked with, but also beyond that. As I told the story of my research, people were just like, yes, my job is not enough for me as a human. I've got more in me to give. It's just fascinating, and it really speaks to how a culture that nurtures and supports that really helps individuals to realize their own human potential, which is essentially the story of my whole career. How do you unlock potential in those others and see them thrive in those situations?
You mentioned that your doctorate, your paper is available. What we'll do, if you're okay with it, we'll put the link in the show notes for anybody that would be interested in reading it. And given that we do have an international audience, Tim, 29 countries, I'm sure there'll be some very, very interested people in wanting to have a read.
Right.
I'd like to talk about some of the continuing on Stone and Chalk just for a moment. One of the key elements that I found in terms of successful organizations, or, you know, from a cultural perspective, is connection. We all crave, as humans, we crave connection. And it's connection and support that I found in my journey, two key elements. How does Stone and Chalk foster that?
So connection, and what was the second one again?
Support,
yeah. I mean, it's central to what we do. So, I mean, the first one is, you know, you talk about connection, I kind of think about that as belonging, which is actually central to our sense of identity. So back in, I think it's 2011 or 12, I actually founded a community of small businesses in National Australia Bank. That's kind of my entrepreneurial journey, called The Village. It was one of the best things I've ever done. But what I realized through doing that is that there were all of these individuals, especially small business owners, that were working from home or coffee shops and things like that, and were incredibly isolated and quite lonely. And bringing them together in a place where they could meet, connect, network, share what they had, learn from each other, even just have a coffee, gave them this incredible sense of belonging and a sense of identity that gave them, you know, it was around their well-being, it was around them finding a place in the world. I think that was central, like you said, to their humanity. And we absolutely do that at Stone and Chalk. When people walk through that door, they will be welcomed as people. Many of them will just find themselves there, they're curious. But I think that the hosting is really important because, you know, when somebody walks in and there's no one there, they kind of can still feel a bit isolated, or whether they don't really know what's happening. But when they're actually welcomed by a human that says, hey, how you going? You know, you can be seen as a person. And when people come in, they find a sense of community that gives them a place of belonging, about a safe place where they can actually kind of explore their ideas and maybe feel a little bit less crazy, and have the courage to kind of lean into the challenges that are important to them. So that's one part. But then the second thing is, well, as you get to know who they are, what their journey is, maybe the startup that they're founding, you can go, oh, these are the kinds of areas where maybe we could offer some support and guidance. And it's not about us kind of giving that support, but it's knowing the people that can actually bring that support to them. And that's, again, central to everything that we do is, we find those crazy people that have an idea that a technology can solve a problem in the world. They realize they have a humility that they will go further when they are open to the support of others. And then we're able to kind of wrap that support around them. So it might be, the investors that would come on and provide some of that capital to help them, hire the next person or make an investment in the technology to take it to that next level. It might be around the experts or the mentors that provide that sort of safe space for learning and guidance. It might be, the talent, the people that actually will sign up as the first or second or third follower. I think they're actually the unsung heroes of startups and innovation. The people that follow, the crazy people, such important work. Or it's the customers. So I talk a lot about like courageous customers. So, the corporates or the government or the other businesses that actually procure those services and go, you know what, like this is actually a really important problem. We have that problem and we want to go on that journey to buy that solution to help solve, even if it's not completely, it's refined and ready to go. It's, hasn't been fully tested maybe, but we're going to take a chance at that. And I think it takes all of those different people, and of course the other crazy people, in our community as well, that we actually go together, and we play that role of the super connector, if you like, to find the different people, the different experiences, the different contexts from different industries, to again lean into solving that problem together.
I'd like to chat about your involvement in the Deloitte's space practice program. And I was reading a little bit here, and it said, connecting real world problems with the people who can solve them. What are some of the real world problems that, because of course the average person in the street thinks, okay, space, how is space going to solve anything that I'm dealing with, whether it's cost of living, poverty, war?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great program. So Gravity Challenge, it really starts with, I guess, that courageous customer I talked about before. So it's an organization, it might be a government agency, it could be a corporate, it could be a large family business. And they see a problem that is important to them, to their clients, to their, impact in their supply chain, whatever it might be. And they're like, actually, we can't solve this on our own, but we want to be a part of building a solution, because we see it's not just important for us, for our customers, for our clients, but it's actually a global problem that's gone unsolved and we haven't seen a solution. So we would work with these customers or these, maybe first buyers, if you like, to package that problem up in a way where it might be solved using space data sets. And there's actually lots of space data out there. It's looking at satellite imagery, it's looking at, it's been a while now, but it's the sensing, the hyperspectral imagery, which looks at kind of different wavelengths and spectrums to understand kind of where there might be like water lying or heat building up or things like that from space. It might be some sort of global positioning, navigation and timing, which we all use through GPS and our phones. There's different things that are out there, but there's actually a lot of data that's already available, because we've got, there's thousands of satellites up there that are all looking down on us all the time. There's actually so much data we don't know what to do with. And with space, it's actually the greatest promise of the space ecosystem or industry isn't actually putting more rockets up. It's actually using the data that's already gathered and actually using it in smarter ways that help us to make better, faster, smarter decisions here on Earth. And that's where the great promise is. So the greatest growth is actually in that data, what they call downstream in the space lingo. So we would we would have all of these great data companies that would say, we've got all these data sets are available. We'd have these customers are like, we actually want to pay for the solution. We can't make it. We need smart people to help us solve it. And then we would package this problem or this challenge up and we'll put it out globally to our community of innovators, so startups and scale-ups and agencies that would actually compete to solve that problem. So they propose a solution, and then we would go through this sort of down selection process to come up with a number of teams that would actually try to tackle that. So a good one that was local in South Australia was with the Department of Industry and Transport, and they have this incredible responsibility for our road networks in South Australia. So we've got, tens of thousands of kilometres of roads. Some of them are sealed, many of them are unsealed. All of them provide vital access for our regional communities, for our, our freight and infrastructure. Access to hospitals, access to food, access to community, access to jobs. Much of the road network goes unmonitored for most of the year. And only about half of that, one lane of half of the network is monitored every year, something like that. It's ridiculous.
Wow.
So the question would be, how might we better monitor those roads, not just for access, but for maintenance needs, to make sure our communities are connected at all times? So this is a real world issue that actually affects all of us in some way. And so they went through a process with our support to actually uncover and develop a solution with a couple of teams that would look at the roads from, up in the sky, from that balcony view, if you like, to help identify where the maintenance money would be best suited and targeted to ensure that our communities stay connected. It's amazing, right? And what they actually did was looking at the moisture levels of the roads. And it just so happened when we had this challenge that we had these incredible floods going across South Australia. So it was actually great timing. But the problem was the solution wasn't up and running to be able to actually deliver that, to know where the maintenance crews could go and target to make sure our communities stay connected. But that's a real world problem using space that helps us with our people in our communities.
That's fascinating. For me, as an outsider, and you think of space, and you said it so well. It's not about putting more rockets up there, but it's about all this data that's available to us. And I never looked at it from that perspective.
Yeah,
it's just fascinating.
Leading on for me, I mean, I sit in these sessions and you see these incredibly smart people who are able to visualize these, little data bits, right? And show a map over time of how the moisture builds up around the particular road areas, and actually over time how those roads might be degrading as a result of, the water or the whatever it might be, the sun damage and things like that. So it's just incredible. So, and it's just, you see these aha moments, right? Like for the client, for the department, who are like, now we know where tax payer dollars are actually better spent to be able to make sure that the people who are most at need are staying connected. It's just amazing. So, and that's just one example. There's plenty of others.
Yeah. And going on from that, I was reading there's over 100 space companies in South Australia.
Yep. Yeah, it's
that's
one of the things that's, when I think about South Australia and I think about, the future of South Australia and the kinds of areas that are up and coming, space as an ecosystem, as a community is one of the huge ones. And every quarter we get together at Stone and Chalk with our partners at the South Australia Space Industry Centre, and we put on a breakfast and we actually hear about all of the great things that are happening, the events, the announcements, the ask for help. We celebrate Rings with the Bell with the whole space ecosystem together, which might actually sound familiar to you, right? Because that's actually what we do every week at Stone and Chalk Sweet Spot. It's actually a ritual for our broader innovation ecosystem, which is absolutely growing. And every quarter that we have that, we see more, a more diverse range of people that are actually coming along and becoming involved from more different industries. So it's not just, those space, the rocket companies or the satellite companies, it's the lawyers, it's the people who are working with people in remote areas. It's, people who are working in energy or mining who are coming along to this because they're realizing that space as an emerging, technology is actually one that can touch all industries in some way, in a positive way, and help make that. And that's just one. We can talk about AI, blockchain. These are enabling technologies that can help us to live more sustainably, less of a negative impact on our environment, and help us to live smarter and more connected. And that's, I think, the real promise of technology is around how it helps us to live better lives, and bring more people along the journey to benefit from that as well.
AI is an interesting subject, obviously, because it just, I'm sure it's been around for a long, long time, but it just feels in the last maybe 6 to 12 months that it's just exploded.
Yeah.
And it seems to be far more accessible to the average person. And there's so much of it out there, so much. There's a fear element to it without doubt. And there's the naysayers that go, oh, it's going to create this problem and create that problem and this problem, and there's all that fear around it, rather than looking at what the positive benefits. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what innovation, invention, whatever, there's always a detriment somewhere along the line, whether it's to a previous industry, previous sector, whatever. How do you respond to, I guess, people as a whole to try and promote the positive benefits of innovation and how they significantly outweigh the downside?
Yeah, I think a lot of that fear comes from the unknown, right? The uncertainty, and a sense that you don't have control over it. And I think, I grew up with the, images of Skynet coming online, and all of science fiction does its fair share of kind of hyping fear as well, I think, right? Which actually, I mean, science fiction kind of does predict the future in a lot of different ways. Yeah, I think for me, I focus on the use case. So looking at what's the problem that it helps us to solve. And I was just reflecting as you're talking around it, a really amazing event. And we bring the AI industry, AI enthusiasts together quite regularly as well. But we had this really incredible experience hosting a AI roundtable for Her Excellency, the Governor of South Australia, a few months ago. And it was amazing because, incredibly, brilliant woman who is just so passionate about supporting great things in South Australia. Like, we have an incredible leader there to look up to. And what we did is we brought together a group of individuals who are leveraging or using AI for impact in South Australia across all different types of industries. And many of them, we might not think about will actually impact us in some way, but, I could come up with a number of examples, but one was a resident of ours who is using artificial intelligence, which is to monitor the quality of grain in silos. So before it comes out from the farm, it goes into the big silos and then it gets graded. And now that grading process, even today, is done very manually by individual humans who are specialty graders. They come in there and they'll have a big batch. They'll take a small bit, they'll have a look at it and they'll rate it. And then that will be kind of what the grain is valued at for the farmer, how it's sold out on the market, all done manually, which is amazing. And she's created using AI. So she's taking lots and lots of imagery and special, monitoring using microscopes and different things, and created an algorithm that will actually grade the grain to a much, 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 much higher quality. Well, not quality, more accurately, I should say, than a person ever could. Wow. And she's actually shown that would lead to a more fairer price for the farmer as well. And it actually means that the industry has more confidence in how they sell that on the market. So what it's doing is actually solving a really important problem. I think about like milk prices and the impact on farmers kind of getting screwed over by large corporates and things. This is actually providing a much more fairer, transparent approach to the grading of the grain, which will have that kind of benefit flow onto farmers. I thought that's just a great example.
Wow.
But was it just, yeah. So, and just as a funny anecdote, when we're talking about AI, the resident who does this sort of had a little bit of a joke, because in the farmers, AI means something quite different. It's artificial insemination. So you got to be careful with your audience. Anyway, it's pretty funny. But I think the point I wanted to make is that we think about AI being artificial intelligence, but the way I like to think of it is it's really augmented intelligence. It's augmenting our intelligence. And as soon as we do that, it reframes it around how is technology helping us to make smarter, better, fairer, more efficient decisions, and to understand the world around us in a way that gives us, hopefully will mean that we're living, better lives. So that's kind of how I think about it. But thinking about the problems that it might solve, I think is the best way to approach. We have a lot of events around AI about demystifying it. One of the things I always say is, well, be curious around what the problems that are in front of you as a business owner, as a corporate, that have gone unsolved, that perhaps a technology like AI might help you to solve more effectively. And if you start with that, I promise you probably hundreds and hundreds of people around the world have already asked that same question. And it's the marvel of, asking online, and even using an engine like ChatGPT to ask that will help you already to augment your own intelligence, let alone to find and develop a solution. So I think that's the real promise.
Yeah, well said. Uh, Interesting about the AI, the different meaning
I know,
for the
yeah.
farmers. One of the things in my communication courses I teach, Tim, is making sure you're speaking the customer's language and they understand.
100%.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, acronyms are
when they
dangerous at the best of times, right? So
extremely dangerous,
yeah.
extremely dangerous. Tim, we've both had the pleasure of being involved with the book Innovate Adelaide, and an amazing human being, April Hobbs. Big shout out to April. And we talk about what's going on in little old Adelaide, and for listeners who wherever you are in the world, Adelaide's a little dot, but Adelaide, from an innovation perspective, is having global impact. We're a serious player here. So the innovation that's taking place here is having a global impact. Can you share maybe one or two stories out of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories. I mean, in our community, we've got, we've had well over 100 companies that are current or come through our residency who are all doing things that haven't been done before. And, South Australia was never a place where you could really push the boundaries. I mean, from my own personal experience, I moved to Adelaide to study in my 20s. The GFC hit. There was just not a lot of courage to do anything different here. So I moved interstate, as many
Most
young
people
people
did.
do, to go and, I guess, cut your teeth in your career. And Adelaide was always somewhere you come back to have a family, which definitely not the reason that I came back. But I came back because I could see after I left what the changes that were happening here. So these sort of innovation precincts were popping up. We have, for AI, we're talking about AI, the Australian Institute of Machine Learning. We've got the Australian Space Agency based here. We've got, this, the modern manufacturing down at Tonsley. Like, you could see that there was kind of these sand pits or these sandboxes where people were able to really grow things that were not just locally or nationally important, but globally, exporting these sort of smart ideas as well. So starting to attract people not only back, but to South Australia for the first time. I had the pleasure of speaking recently at a sort of Australian International Education Congress. It was, thousands of people there. It was amazing. And I had the pleasure of hosting a session on the rise of the international student entrepreneur. And we had an individual who was one of our residents who had moved to South Australia for an education, fallen, I guess, in love and with the support of the innovation ecosystem that he had engaged with around all the programs. The unis here have got great programs around entrepreneurship and innovation, and had brought together health tech with space tech to create a startup that would actually send biological test kits into space to test medicines and new drugs on cells as they're in micro, or zero gravity, and then, transmit the data sets back or even bring it back down. It's an amazing what they do. And that's something that never existed before, but it came out of, a engagement and generosity from the innovation ecosystem that this student was able to engage with as an international student, and has now migrated to South Australia, setting up a company that's, sending things into space to help solve things around, drugs and, looking at better solutions to HIV medication, and looking at kind of, how we can reduce what is it? What's it called? Sorry. It's the antibiotic vaccines and things. And because a lot of the cells and things are unable to, they actually have this, I can't think of the word. Sorry, Con.
That's all right.
It's amazing what they do. Like, anyway,
nah.
But essentially, like, antibiotics is not having as much of an effect these days, right? So they're actually able to do tests on cells and new drugs to help actually reduce that, which is amazing.
Okay.
So again, solving a problem here on Earth using, space in a way that hasn't been done. That wouldn't exist if it wasn't for these new experiences and opportunities here in South Australia. So, to your point, what we're doing here is breaking new ground in little old South Australia, which is now, absolutely punching above its weight. And I think there's a lot of things there to be proud of. And I think, we can definitely do better to tell the stories. And, you talked about the book, and that's really, a great artifact of great things happening in South Australia. And, we should be, really proud of all the good things that are happening here and tell that story more.
Very much so, which leads me to my next question. I'm a parochial South Australian, and I've lived here uh, all bar 3 years in good old Adelaide, and I love Adelaide. And
Me too.
until I met April and discovered the work that she was doing, and until I had the absolute pleasure of meeting you at Lot 14 there, I felt like I'd been living under this rock. I felt like a caveman. Now, how can Stone and Chalk, Lot 14, or indeed the innovation community, how can they better get, or I guess not necessarily better, but more effectively get the message out to the broader community about the absolutely world-changing work that they're doing? Because I'm sure there's people in the general populace that, did they know about what was going on, perhaps they may be of some support. I don't know. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts there?
I think it's our next challenge and opportunity, to be honest. So when I came back to South Australia, I could see all these great things, and similar to you, I think they were quite hidden for a while. And I think the reason why they were is because they were probably the engagement was with a smaller group of people that kind of understood it. Technology companies aren't something that's typically been accessible for most people. Like you need to be very, very, education and high levels of university to be able, whether you do a doctorate or you go through kind of a, advanced engineering or whatever it might be. Like not everyone's going to work for a space company, right? But I think where we're going now is we're understanding that the real value of these technologies is in helping to solve things that matter for all South Australians. And I think this is kind of where we're coming into now. And part of that's around that storytelling. And the other part is as these companies grow and expand, they're going to be needing to bring more diverse ranges of people from backgrounds along with them to be able to scale the impact that they have. So I think that's actually just naturally where we are in terms of, the why for the investment that's been made in these innovation districts and things like that. And I can absolutely see that there are plans for greater engagement beyond. From my perspective and from Stone and Chalk in our mission, it's very much, a question I ask myself every day is, as we have these events and these engagements and these companies, I think about who's not in the room that might benefit from being involved. So thinking about, the industries, the individuals, the people from, different backgrounds, from, cultures or the regions or outer suburbs and things like that, who don't understand what's in it for them, but could benefit from finding a way forward. And I think, we talked about kind of the demystifying, reducing the fear around AI. I think that's kind of what part of it is actually being able to socialize the why for impact and the goodness that can come out of these things. So it's not just something for some people that are over there, but it's something that actually has a direct impact on me here.
Yeah.
And I think we're still on a journey to be able to tell that story in a way that is accessible. I just think next door to us at Stone and Chalk, we have the Australian Space Agency, but on the ground floor, we have the Australian Space Discovery Centre. It's kind of like the Questacon for space. If you've ever been to Questacon in Canberra, it's kind of fun, it's engaging, kind of, makes it real. It helps young people to understand why, not only is it really cool and you can kind of play with it, but it makes it accessible. And I think that's kind of where we need to go. And I agree, I think there's a bit of work to do there. But part of that is kind of being out there, going and speaking to people in the regions. It's kind of telling the stories. It's making it kind of accessible. We've got a long way to go. I think the book actually is a part of that, is a part of being able to understand that. But I think, I think the storytelling is important, but also, working with the schools and the young people, just like we started talking about, the graduating class at Adelaide Botanic. It's like, well, what is this really about? I'm like, well, these are jobs that you might be able to go into, right? And it's not that you need to go off and do kind of a really high tech, degree or anything, but it actually might be opportunity for you, as an internship or as a, going through TAFE or, maybe there's something as a trade, as an apprenticeship that can be coming through here. And actually, there's a whole lot of people in South Australia that are really dedicated to creating new opportunities for this next generation. It actually takes all of us to do that. But we only do that by opening it up and thinking, who's not in the room today? Who's not in this company that might benefit from that? And I think that's something that's a responsibility for all of us.
No, absolutely. Going back to something you just mentioned about access to people. I remember years ago, there was the Discovery Science Centre next to the Wayville Showgrounds.
Oh, yeah.
And that was, as a kid, like which school excursions and seeing what was going on there. And I think that's a really, really important part of having things like that create that exposure, and more schools go in, parents take them in, and so on.
Yep.
Tim, I could talk to you for days, but I know you're a very busy man. Before we wind up, I have one last question, and this was certainly something that was brought up at the book launch as well, and it was a tall poppy syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Now, tall poppy syndrome is something that's been discussed and been around for quite some time, and the general consensus when I talk to people seems that it's something that's unique to Australia, and indeed Adelaide. I don't necessarily agree with that.
No, I don't think so.
However, how do we deal with that in what we're dealing with here?
Yeah, I mean, I think of, tall poppy. I also think imposter syndrome is probably the other one that, might be a bit more familiar to people. And it's interesting. And I think about kind of the startup and entrepreneur and innovator scene and how that's actually going through a transformation, I believe, in South Australia, especially at the moment. And it's moving, I believe, from the heropreneur, the focus on the individual founder being kind of the center of the universe and doing, everyone wanting to be the Elon Musk or Richard Branson sort of thing, which is kind of somebody who's very proud and out there and a very special kind of person. But unlike, 99.99% of the population, what I'm seeing through, my work and the community is the rise of sort of the impact entrepreneur, which is very much around, there's a humility, it's not about me, it's about the we, it's about who I'm bringing along with me. There's a humility there, which I think can come out as a bit of the tall poppy, but a bit of that imposter syndrome. And the individuals that I'm working with are very, very good people. And they're like, they've realized that there's a better way to solve a problem that matters through the business model they're creating. And the same for the people, the teams that they bring on. They're actually really, really good people and they believe in what they're doing. What they're not good at doing is getting in front of people and making it all about them, because it's an ecosystem, not an ecosystem. Yeah. That's how, I like that. And they're actually they're actually humble servants in a lot of ways. And I think that's kind of where, we don't want people to be going around like they don't want to be the next Elon Musk, because, that's a very special kind of person. But telling the story of how they're touching the lives of people beyond, just their circle around them is really, I think, how we get through that. And again, part of why the book's important, the Impact, the Innovator Adelaide book, an important part of the work we do is actually helping those individuals who are actually making a real difference and killing it, get up and ring the bell and have that moment where the community around them, show them and pat them on the back and say, actually, you're killing it and we're all really proud of you, and keep going, because you're going to inspire the next generation of people to come on board, or people who are already in jobs, or people who have just been made redundant, or the factory have closed down, to go, I've seen a problem worth solving and I can find the courage in myself to lean into that and bring others around that. It's a very different approach to innovating. It's a very different approach to startup and entrepreneurship, but I actually think it's one that South Australia could, make as its own and be very proud of. And I think that for me, that's the hunch that I have. I don't think we're there yet, but my hunch is that if we went there and we found more people like that, again, we would kind of be a global center of, this real ecosystem of support. And every founder that I have in my community now, I see that real service impact mindset. So that's kind of my intuitions around it. I don't think that, I think there's another level of, we talked about the comfort of chaos and change and disruption. I actually think there's another level of comfort around, that being able to tell a story and be proud, but represent the problem and the solution that you've found. So we actually become a symbol of something more than just ourselves. And actually that was at the heart of my PhD as well, is that who do we need to become to be able to lean into the problem and the direction that we want to go? And that actually takes a whole nother level of humility and level of service for impact. We actually need to become someone different. And that was actually at the heart of my big, huge learning that I had. And what I also shared with these students is our sense of self isn't something that's actually, is carved out of stone and is unchanging. It's actually something that's written in chalk and can change again and again. It's actually up to us to shape who we want to be in the world, and importantly, who the world needs us to be. And that was my message to the students. It's my message to all of the entrepreneurs. It's the message to anyone on the call today, is that actually who you are is more malleable. And the best way to change yourself is to surround yourself with people that inspire you, people who have qualities that you want to see in yourself. And that's collecting the good eggs and bringing them around you and finding a community of people that are just as crazy as you.
Sage words. Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing all your wise words. As I mentioned earlier, from a global perspective, we're here in little old Adelaide, but we're making global impact. And that's all thanks to people like Dr. Tim Mahlberg Sie. Tim, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks,
my guest today has been Dr. Tim Mahlberg Sie, Director of Ecosystems at Stone and Chalk here in South Australia. My name is Con. I am the Conversationalist, and until next time, bye for now.